This episode is sponsored by Arc IT, and you'll find out more about them later on in the episode. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Evan Troxel. And in this episode, I'm joined by Aaron Maller of Parallax team. That's Maller like Mallard the duck, as Aaron says it, without the D. He doesn't correct people who pronounce his name incorrectly, so let this podcast be the guiding light for all of you out there who are talking to Aaron Maller. Aaron is well known in the world of Revit consulting and his often opinionated nature in Revit forums and technology conferences, and his point of view never assumes that we should continue to do things the way they have always been done, which I totally appreciate. On the Parallax team website, it says, sometimes technology is an answer. Sometimes technology is the problem. Sometimes technology is neither, but our captivation with it distracts us from looking at the issue critically. And it also says we are critical thinkers and problem solvers, not technology, hardware, or software pushers. We develop workflows and strategies and processes that get teams to the finish line to help deliver quality projects. The original idea for this episode was around the framework of building a team versus building the team, which it seems Aaron has been pretty successful at doing. And we do get into that. But after a hell of a couple weeks, it was just good to have a conversation with him and catch up and talk shop. And in this episode, you'll hear Aaron's wife, Allison, who he references several times in our conversation on another call in the background, because they do share an office and work together. So please forgive the audio there, but it was unavoidable and totally fine. We talk about how Parallax started and how he put together their fantastic team, some things that he's come up against along the journey of doing what they do, and we even mention a few tools that have become indispensable along the way, which might not be the kinds of tools you're thinking we might talk about, and so much more. So without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Aaron Maller. Let's do this.
Sure. Yeah, totally.
I don't have an agenda. I don't have any prepared questions. Last week was the week from hell, and so I would just love to have a conversation with you.
Absolutely. No pressure. We both have plenty we could just go on about, I'm sure.
Yesterday, my 8-bay Synology rack mount showed up.
Nice. Oh, you got a rack mount. Awesome.
I did because
awesome.
I just wanted to clean things up. Now, then I was thinking, what if something goes wrong at the house? It's really hard to get the whole rack out. I should have just got the desktop because that's the thing I would grab, right?
That's what you get. That's what you get the S3 for, and you just let it back up over the internet to itself.
But I got a lot of terabytes. That's the thing I'm scared about is backing that up. It's expensive.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Because like most of my projects like that are video. I mean, like photo and video.
Sure.
So they just take up a lot of space. And do I need to save all that footage? I don't think so. But do I want to go back and clean it out? I don't want to do that either.
Yeah. I mean, the fast way to do that is to find somebody else, that wants to hold another disk station for you at their house. And then you just back it up to their house.
I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to just send my old one over to my parents' house and do that.
The truth comes out. That's really why we grew the team, was just so I could have more destinations to put NAS devices in and back up. No, I'm just kidding.
You're just cheap insurance to me. Can I rent 3 square feet of your house, please? And some of your internet connection.
Pretty much. Actually, it's really funny, from an IT point of view. I mean, being a small company, when I started Parallax in 2015, I got the advice of like two folks who I still work with, and they're both, pretty close to Parallax in terms of I've worked with them over the years, and they were like my 2 IT advisors. And obviously I was trying to set up something, fairly small, but I also had certain things that I wanted as requirements that a lot of small businesses don't care about, but it's like things that I needed to be able to test on behalf of clients. So I wanted an actual domain set up. I wanted a domain controller. I wanted virtual machines I could access. So we did all this stuff setting it up when, the typical 2020s way to set up a company is like throw it all on SharePoint and MS 365 and you're good. And so we do have like a NAS device, at every location, which is not very scalable. If you're planning on being 50 people, it's probably something I would rethink.
Yeah, right.
but for 5, it works great, and everybody has kind of local resources, so performance is great. But yeah, it also is funny because when it was just me, so I had the one NAS, and we were backing it up on site, and we were backing it up to a cloud. And then when John came on board, so we had the second setup, and then because I was paranoid, this is funny. Both NASs were backing up to the cloud, even though they were also copies of each other. And then as we've grown, so I mean, there's obviously 4 devices now, and now we're down to only one of them backing up to the cloud. So it's like, man, if all 4 houses catch on fire and the cloud goes down, I guess we just write it off as a bad day and we all go flip burgers on the beach.
That would be quite an event, yeah. I think it would be rather defeating if that happened.
yeah. At that point, I just give up, and
right.
It's over.
Right. Yeah, I'm gonna go make sandcastles.
The analogy I always use on forums is funny. Like on Revit forum or on Reddit, whenever I'm giving somebody help and I want to just talk about what I would do in a feudal situation, I'm like, I think I would go get a push cart and I would flip burgers on the beach. And I've got to say, the more times I say it, it sounds really validating. Like I would enjoy just walking on a boardwalk and flipping burgers.
And people would hand you cash and you would put it in your pocket. Yep. And it would be such a different experience, right? than
I just think it would be so much fun. Yeah. I want to retire on a beach where I can just like have a little food cart and wander the beach. And that's living.
My dream right now is to like find a small mountainside area that we could develop into like mountain biking trails and just be a destination for adventure. Like I want a river coming by, so I want a camping spot for people. I want to have beer and coffee and pizza, and that's it. But at the same time, like I don't want that business at all. Like I don't want to run it. I just want to be there all the time. So I can own it and I can hire a crew to run it. Like the best.
There are communities like that down here in Texas for car racing. Yeah, you can buy like a condo on the racetrack. Wow. And you have to be okay with the sound of cars going by at 150 miles an hour. And these people buy these condos because it saves them all the cost. Like if they're hardcore and they're going to go race every Saturday or every Sunday, they don't have to trailer their car there. They just leave it at the condo. And
it's just like living at a ski resort, right? Like you've got I've never heard of this before though.
Me either, until like Allie's brother was telling me about it, because they like to go for track days down in Houston. And apparently there's a track up here near us, and there's one down in Houston that's doing it. So it was pretty interesting, I thought.
I think you've got a good car for autocross. Why don't you should start getting into that?
Man, that thing is a land beast.
Big, heavy sedan.
I think it would be out of control fun.
But you've seen Ronin, right? Ronin's got to be one of your favorite movies.
I love that movie, and I'm not gonna lie. Like before I get rid of that car, I would love to try it once, just to see.
Amazing. Yep.
I mean, it goes through brakes and tires so fast that I couldn't see putting a beating on it like that. But the funny thing is, it's so big and it's so inefficient that, just in terms of how heavy it is, but it still goes faster than like any other car I've owned, that I'm kind of like, even though you've got this massive laborious thing trying to go through a turn, I mean, when you stomp on it, it's going to come out of the turn so fast anyway that I'm half tempted to try it and just see what it does.
Well, and they use like the softest compounds for the brakes and the tires on those cars so that it's the best feel. And you go through them like crazy. I had A4 that was just like that. I mean, and it was like, what? Brakes again? What?
Yeah. It goes through tires in about 17,000 miles, which is just depressing.
Oh my gosh. Totally.
I mean, and they're on 21s, so they're not fun to buy.
Yeah. Tires are the worst to buy. Like I get mad when I have to buy tires.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't drive like a crazy person, but I do drive fast. And so the sales rep always laughs at me when I take that car into the dealership, because she's like, yeah, the corners of your tires are just they're gone. And I'm like, yeah.
Yes, they are.
Was a good road trip car though. I had to drive it to Atlanta, to a client's recently. And it was actually a great car for the trip, and, good enough to get a ticket in Louisiana, which was awesome.
Oh,
but,
ouch.
Yeah. And I didn't realize that was a thing, because I mean, I haven't done an interstate road trip since like 2011 or 2012 when I drove back to New York, but they're like, Texas plate, let's get him in Louisiana. And
right.
Okay.
Yep. Target.
So yes.
They've got their camera with the computer vision just looking for out of state plates, right? It's like Target.
Pretty much, pretty
Yeah.
much. But it was my favorite kind of traffic stop because they were like super efficient. I was literally pulled over on the side, got my ticket, and I'm like, the only thing that would have been more efficient is if they just walked up with a credit card machine,
Right.
and I could have just
Pay,
and,
yep. Apple
and been
Pay,
on the way.
Samsung Pay, right there.
That would be great. Like, I'm all about that. They were super efficient. They actually told us like there's a sticker on the back. It tells you the website to go do your traffic thing to get out of the ticket that you're getting in a few minutes. So go to this. And I'm like, that's how you do it. You got to be efficient.
It's a business. Meeting that quota.
Again, like I feel like as an industry, we should do a little better. Like I'm like, man, even traffic enforcement, they've got this efficiency thing down. They're just like, show up, here's the pre-filled out form, do that, and you're good.
Well, that's kind of that is the idea of some of these companies. I had Brian Ringley on and talking about Spot a little bit. It was more of just a holiday BS conversation. It was really fun. But we did get to Spot at one point. And I mean, that's the idea. You've got this robot that walks around the job site and actually, I mean, I think this was also the idea behind Doxel AI, which was the little tread-based Facebook robot. And the idea was like, you said that this ductwork is installed. We verify that it's installed. Yep, get paid for it. I can see how the promise of kind of linking all of these things together through blockchain and smart contracts and, like these are a bunch of buzzwords and bells and whistles. But at the same time, it's like you can actually imagine a future where when people do something, they get paid for it in like a streaming music kind of a sense, right? It's like I did the thing, the payments in the bank, we're done with that part, move on. And it's just this constant kind of churn of checks and balances where you don't simply have to rely on what somebody said they did or what corners you don't know they cut or whatever, because there are these kind of built-in checks and balances. It's kind of
absolutely. I mean, and we joke around in our house because like the amount of time that we spend internally, like when I have like invoice day, it's like my most miserable day of the month. It's like, okay, let me sit here and type out everything I did and then, how much that was. And it is kind of a senseless thing in terms of you generally already wrote down the same items in the proposal at the beginning of the project. And it's like, now you're just basically translating and saying, I did this. And I mean, on construction sites or even in design work, you'd like to think that, the deliverables are all in a computerized fashion or they're physically built. Those are both things that should be able to automatically be checked. It's kind of interesting. And I mean, Spot, the dog bot, I don't know what they call Spot actually, but I mean, and the other one, I forgot the name.
Let's go with that.
Quadruped. I mean, I've seen so many companies over the years that wanted to help kind of automate getting like model data out onto site before it was built so that they can make sure, exactly where things go. And I've seen a bunch of interesting methods. There are some that like try to draw on slabs.
Right.
There are some that were like just going out and putting stakes. I saw one where this was kind of interesting. They were actually printing walls at a 1-to-1 scale on like tape, rolls of tape. And then you like go roll them out on site and it shows you where everything goes in the wall. A whole bunch of interesting ideas. But I mean, the quadruped, I guess we're going to call it, is kind of an interesting one because the biggest issue with the ones I've seen that like roll around on the slab or drive on the slab is like, what if the slab's not there?
Something gets in the way. Or what if the
slab steps or it has a depression and it drops off?
You've got stairs, right?
Or you've got stairs, right? I actually did hear a story of a laser scanner like falling down an elevator shaft, and I'm kind of imagining like some little like crawly thing getting over to the elevator shaft and then falling in. But it's interesting, and these all kind of tie back. I think there's like 3 or 4 conversations that are like all the same, which is we got asked recently about, modeling wall framing, and we get asked this like every 10 minutes, somebody asks about modeling framing. And I always go back to this conversation I had with Bob Bell like a billion years ago. Bob is from like the electrical background. And so we always joke around about modeling level of detail. And there's all these documents that say like, everything's got to be modeled at LOD 300, which means it's in the right place in the model. And Bob pointed out to me, he's like, as an electrical engineer placing outlets and switches, you can't ever guarantee they're in the right spot because they go where the stud is and we don't get to control where the stud goes. And I'm like, okay, so that's kind of like an out there point of view. But I mean, if you take it at face value, which makes a lot of sense, then like, let's cut all this baloney where we say like people have to model to this level of detail because you're right. If you're the engineer, you can't do that.
Right.
Unless we can actually say, here's where a piece of framing has to go.
Right.
Here we need an outlet or a switch. So we need to put a stud here. And again, like if there are robots and stuff on site that can say where those things go, if they can do it expeditiously overnight while nobody's there and they're not holding anybody up. I think the whole reason none of that stuff really gets automated now is because it is unfortunately just faster to let a bunch of guys who know what they're doing run out on site and frame the walls however they want.
Yeah, I mean that is the idea of Spot, I think, as one of the main use cases, which is, walk the site at night with, LiDAR scanning stuff, and then take that point cloud, link it back to the model, and do a comparison, or do something like what you're talking about. It's like, well, where are those studs? Okay, now we can do this part of the project, which is place the outlets. I just think that you're talking about a ton of data, and you got to get really good at data management, because we know what working with point clouds is like, and it's not the fastest process, but I'm sure that there's going to be smarter and smarter tools that can decimate and build, like, I could imagine this is really where the gaming industry can come in, where they're so used to working at such low resolution, but displaying it back to you in a way that you can't tell. And it just works. And it's totally optimized for the experience. I could see some kind of interface where it's like, take reality, optimize it for a gaming engine, and show it back to me that I can link it into my design model and make adjustments as necessary, but not worry about perfection. Like that, to me, is where everybody's getting caught up in the LOD 300s and 400s. And it's like drawings were never meant to, they were meant to be abstracted representation of design intent, not reality. And you would let that crew figure things out on the site because that's what they were expert at.
Sure. Yeah.
So there is a very, I think, big mismatch of trying to get models and information to a level of detail that was never intended for an architect, at least, to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and we see this a lot. Like, a couple of weeks ago, we started, we had to just build a simple content library for a client of workstations, just desks for offices for space planning. And it sounds like a really simple, basic thing, and it should be. But when you start digging into like what the manufacturers are doing, it's kind of interesting, because if you rip apart a Hayworth or a Steelcase desk, it is all these individual little components, and they're offering their content as all of these little components. Yes. And I'm like, okay, like somebody who does, the actual FF&E procurement might want to do this, but does an architect really want to sit there and say, okay, this is a forward-facing 3-panel metal, and I'm going to put an end cap here? Like, that's not what they want to be doing.
Nope.
There's a desk, and I agree with making it so that if you have two desks front to back, they don't both have a rear wall, because you don't want those things conflicting with each other. But like, holy moly, nobody wants to sit there on the manufacturer's website and like drag in individual pieces to assemble these desks. And I do think that's a mistake. Like, I don't think we want to get into that. And then the flip side is, if somebody does pull down and use all of that stuff, the amount of trash that's just littered throughout a project is suddenly, just untenable from a performance point of view.
Totally. Yeah, I saw somebody was talking about going to Revit City for the comments because they're hilarious, right? And it was just like, yeah, but at Revit City, because you're talking about, you have zero control over what you're going to download from a manufacturer or what's on Revit City or whatever. As far as like level of detail, as far as naming convention, it goes so deep. Yeah. And it's like, all I wanted was the content. That's all I wanted was this thing to represent this thing. I didn't want all that other stuff.
So yeah, what's funny about that is we released 2 updates to libraries this week. And whenever we update one of our libraries, we send out an email to all previous customers and say, here's an update to the library that you own already. So here's the new download link. And these were plumbing fixture libraries. So we actually went through explaining our process in one of these emails, because we were making a couple of corrections in like 3 or 4 pieces. But whenever we're going in the library, we also do some additions. And the additions are from manufacturers, but we can't go to Kohler and like use their stuff, because again, it's brutal. There's just so much overdone stuff. So what we do is we go to Kohler, we open their component, we find the nice geometry, we pick it up and we drop it into a clean component. And then we just fix a bunch of stuff, repair a bunch of things, that goofy things that they do. They don't join geometry. They've got redundant geometry. So you get Z fighting when you're in something like Enscape or, or Lumion or whatever. So we fix all of that. And then we just have like a simplified, dumbed down, if you will, version of what they were doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's weird. Better. It's like, It is better. And it's
Yeah.
just kind of sad because it's like, if you go to their website, like the toilet and the flush valve are like two separate objects. And again, I'm like, are you really trying to tell somebody they need to place a toilet and then place a flush valve? Like, talk about an exercise in futility. Fees are already bad enough. Like, I don't think anybody's got time to place every toilet twice.
There's so many uses for a model, right? There is the visualization aspect, there is the energy modeling aspect, and there is multitudes of, there's fabrication elements, and none of these things are actually necessarily the same. So when somebody's modeling for documents, they're not necessarily modeling for visualization. They're not modeling for fabrication. They're not modeling for X, Y, and Z. Everybody expects the same model to work for all of those things at the same time.
So this is a really interesting one, and I get into this debate on forums a lot, and I even got into this debate, which probably worked against me, while talking to a potential client about a year ago, because we often lose sight of what the goal is. And what I mean by that is, I often get told by potential clients or clients that they want it to be that there's only one instance of something in a model. And I said, well, is the goal to only have one of the objects, or is the goal to get done with the whole project in the most efficient way possible and have the most data accuracy? Because, and again, even if you take a silly example like architecture and structure, they're both going to show the same wall.
Right.
There's a number of reasons why architects have to show it for fire rating. They also need to host elements like doors in it. Structure needs to show the strength of the concrete. And I agree, this is a stupid problem, by the way. It's a software problem. Architects and engineers don't care about the problem. I get it. But the amount of time we've had the conversation about, like, how do we make it work where there's only one wall? If you get everybody to step back and say, what's the goal in only having one wall? Well, we want to make sure that there's not conflicting information. Awesome goal. We want to make sure it's shown correctly everywhere. Also an awesome goal. But as the goal being only have the model, or only have the wall in one model, that's a lousy goal, because we're sort of like, we're trying to work towards this utopian model that, to your point, like, who cares if there's more than one version of the wall? If there's more than one version of the wall, obviously every party that you just mentioned needs to know which version they should be using.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's very important. I'm also hoping the versions are not very different.
Right.
I mean, if I compare the architectural version of a concrete wall and the structural, I'm pretty sure the architectural one's not going to list like concrete strength and reinforcing. I am really hoping they're in the same place and they're the same exact size.
Yes.
I don't think that's a very high bar.
Nope.
But I mean, we go through this for, walls, light fixtures, HVAC, air terminals, whatnot. And to your point, energy modeling, fabrication level models. So, should we be picking up our design model and passing it over, to somebody doing viz or doing fabrication? I'm not sure the answer is yes. I think there's like a big asterisk on that,
It's the same. I think it's the same issue, because architects are actually doing a set of documents for plan review and approval, not for necessarily what a contractor needs to build the building. There's a lot of fighting there. And obviously that's where it always has worked that way. And there's an expectation of a lot more communication that happens throughout the process. But it doesn't mean the model works for construction. And so delivering a model as the deliverable instead of a set of drawings, there needs to become a lot more alignment between what the agency needs to see and review and what the contractor needs to see and review, and that model work for both of those outcomes, in addition to all the other ones that happen along the way.
Sure. Yeah. So it's funny because for me, and I'm totally biased because of the type of work that I do, but for me, there's a much bigger asterisk when we talk about like the architectural model and construction versus like the architectural model and energy modeling. And like, all I mean by that is, I also ideally was like, I want this model that we're building in architecture to get used by energy analysis, folks. And by and large, all the energy analysis professionals I talked to were like, yeah, we're going to build our own because it's going to be 150 times faster than fixing that thing.
Yes.
And I'm like, really? But there should only be one model.
Right.
And no, I was totally wrong, because they could pull in the architectural model, rebuild a much simpler model that they worked or they needed to work in energy analysis, and they were done in like an hour.
Right.
Whereas like in an hour, they could solve one hole in the architectural model.
Yes.
Now, architecture and construction, like I totally understand and somewhat agree that it can't just be the model gets lobbed over the fence and folks in construction take it and automatically do whatever they want. However, the amount of holes and disparities coming out of architectural models right now, I do think it's on architects to tighten that up. I mean, I agree. You can't just lob it over the fence and let GCs do whatever they want with it. But I do think there should be a realistic expectation. Like, I mean, let's take the age old note of like, do not scale the drawings, right? Like, I understand why the note exists. It's a valid note given all those reasons that it exists. However, it shouldn't be misconstrued or expanded upon to mean that if you go scale a room, the room scales as 25 feet when it's 20. Like, come on, that can't happen. There has to be a reasonable expectation of accuracy.
This is a risk management keynote.
Sure.
Right? That's all
Sure.
it is.
I mean, it is, but that we've had a lot of fun at Parallax in terms of when we get to do modeling for contractors, we get to find all kinds of crazy things, but we shouldn't be finding that, architecture, structure, civil, and landscape, all four of them drew the same wall. It's 4 different sizes. It's in 4 different locations. It's 4 different height. Like, that level of what the heckness shouldn't be happening on jobs. It's totally fair to say, don't scale the dimension. If you need a dimension, issue an RFI. I'm totally on board with that within reason. Like, if I'm the GC and I say, what size and what location is this wall, and none of the 4 parties know, okay, I want all 4 parties to go fix something in a drawing.
Yeah, right.
And the bummer is the way it gets fixed in drawings now, and this legitimately we've seen this on a job. We did issue an RFI once where architecture and structure had conflicting dimensions, and the way it got fixed is one of the disciplines took the dimensions off the drawing.
There you go. Not my problem.
so I get that in the spirit of the RFI, the issue is now fixed, but the drawing is still wrong. And if you overlaid them, they still didn't match up. And then, of course, their answer was, well, it's not dimensioned and you can't scale the drawings. And I'm like, is this really where we are?
But that disclaimer came from the days of old when we were drawing by hand. And it's like, instead of redrawing the whole sheet, I'm just going to change the number on the dimension.
Of course.
Totally.
Of course.
But we're still using it. It's crazy.
And I kind of wonder about that now too. Like, we still have these discussions about old school graphical standards, right? And the other day we were talking to a new client about like tags. And okay, so the old school tradition, like if a door tag is in an enlarged plan, it doesn't also get tagged in the overall plan or whatever. And I understand where it came from. So yeah, then you don't have to change it in 2 spots. If you issue a revision, you don't have to revise 2 sheets. Does this really still need to be driving though?
Right.
I mean, because, that's a stupid problem, but it's like the number changes automatically unless you've completely borked something. So we don't need to worry about that. Clouding a revision is still an issue, but holy cow, like, you automate PDFing the drawings and all this stuff. I'm like, why? Like, this annoys me that we're still having to worry about this.
Right.
And so it's kind of one of those things that I'm just like, why is that still driving? Like, why is that still even a thing?
I saw it once where I got a call actually from somebody on the risk management team, and they said, "Hey, what do you think about this? This just came across my desk." They were doing QA on a set of drawings, and there was just a note. There were no dimensions on the sheet. It was like a slab plan, okay? And it said, "Check model for dimensions." And it was like, well, okay, I totally understand. Like, these people they're forward thinking, because
sure,
but they're also assuming several things that may not in fact be true. You don't know the level of sophistication of the contractor because it's design, build. You don't know what software they're using, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And at the same time, it's like, this is what we want to shoot for at some point. And then it just goes to the lawyer, and the lawyer says, no way. Because the lawyer says standard of care is dimensions on drawings. That's what everybody does. So you can't, you don't get out of that.
Yeah. So naively and arrogantly, I can just throw the grenade up in the air and say, the lawyers and the principals and the people who wrote the contracts are all the people that need to just get out of the way.
Yeah.
That's the most frustrating thing to me. And, and I go back to, working on the BIM side. I mean, I'm not on the architectural side, and I'm not writing any of the contracts, but I get asked to review a lot of clients' BIM documents. And it's like, well, we took the time, we wrote this entire BIM execution plan, and we wrote all these standards, and we did all this stuff. And then we just grenaded the whole thing because, well, we have to use the AIA's documents. That's what this person prefers. And I'm like, with respect to the AIA, like, I understand that their charter is very different than, what the goal is of modeling technology. And, if you go to the AIA or you go to the AGC and you ask them about their standards for what they think is important out of a model, obviously they have a specialized interest in what they want those models to do or not do.
Right.
And I go back to the fact that there are, according to some of these agencies, different level of details for construction documents versus suitable for coordination. I'm like, wait, what? So you're saying the drawings go out and they're good enough to draw and be complete drawing wise, but they're not good enough to do coordination wise. I question the validity of that basic principle. Even when I was doing architecture in Revit, when I used to work in architecture, like once the drawings went out, at least for the firm I used to work in, that was it. Like they were out there. And once they were out there, we had to live and die with those.
Yeah,
so
right.
yeah, it's not okay for me that like we're going to kick the drawings out the door and then, take 6 weeks to make changes that suddenly make them valid for coordination. Why don't we just call that the drawings?
Right.
And call the other thing 80%?
Yeah, this gets back to, I think, the stuff we were talking about earlier with what a contractor needs versus what an agency needs in a model. And I don't think we even ask the question enough of the contractor, and often because we're in a design bid build situation rather than design build, which is what do you need in this set of drawings?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
What do you need in the drawings? What would you like out of the model? And that gets interesting because, again, so many folks on the design side still act like they're not aware that electronic exports are a thing or that they happen. And again, it comes back to, they export CAD plans at their own risk. Like, oh my gosh, like let's all take a step back for a second, because unless everybody in architecture has taken one of their own PDF plans and then sat there in AutoCAD and tried to redraw the entire plan based on the dimensions, I don't think folks understand the time investment they're talking about. So, I mean, to clear the air, nobody's doing it. GCs aren't doing it. Subcontractors aren't doing it. Nobody is starting from a blank slate and based solely on dimensions and wall types, recreating entire drawings for the production of their shop drawings. Like that doesn't happen. Or if it does, it happens with 5 out of 100 subcontractors. So, it's kind of like if everybody understands that happens, then yeah, going back to your question, maybe the entire drawing set doesn't need to be complete. Maybe they need to know that what's in an 1/8-inch plan matches what's in a plan detail. That's not a crazy standard to want to say. Is I just want the 1/8-inch plan to be correct dimensionally.
Right. Yeah.
I can get it.
And I think one of the issues here is because there's this level of distrust between parties or an adversarial even nature to it, that those questions never even come up because nobody wants to be in a position of kind of submissiveness to another party to say, well, what do you actually need? Because there isn't a value placed on us all being on the same team, or because of all of the legal nature that's happened.
Yeah, I mean, and it's kind of funny to me, that all the parties are involved in the job at very different points in time. I mean, the design team may have been involved for 5 years prior, and then suddenly the building team comes out there. And, one of the biggest frustrations that I see is, if you're the owner and something goes wrong on the job site, I mean, within reason, and of course I'm overgeneralizing when I say this, but like within reason, there's design fees, and then there's like construction costs, and then something happens on site, and one is, the big picture money, the owner can only really fight with the GC or the subs over it because, again, design fee, construction costs. But the other problem is these folks already have their money. I mean, the design already happened. They already got paid. They're in like the wind down of their contract. So when it starts turning into mudslinging, there's only so many directions you can throw mud because, some people are already sitting pretty and the job's over for them.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that looks like. I'm not an accountant. I'm not a lawyer. I mean, maybe everybody's fees for big ticket projects like that need to go into like some sort of an escrow and they don't actually get doled out until the end.
Right.
And again, design build, that's what's great, shared savings and project teams working together to solve those problems so that everybody, gets to keep a piece of whatever pie is left, and everybody gets penalized when it goes wrong. But that's all, again, yeah, like you said, that's all contracts and lawyers and front end. And And every time I hear that a job wants to do it in an innovative fashion, it's always going in that direction in the initial talks. And then the moment the contract gets written, it's, oh, but by the way, this is the standard form that we use. So sign that. And
we're going to do it like we've always done it.
Why did we have this conversation?
Yeah, it's a huge waste of time. Let's take a break from this conversation and welcome back the sponsor for this episode, ArcIT. I'm going to stick a review in this time. So here's a review from an actual customer of ArcIT. The team at ArcIT has been fantastic. After years of struggling with unsatisfactory workarounds, security breaches, slowdowns, and poor IT assistance, they're extremely pleased with ArcIT. The architecture firm of 40 employees with 2 offices is in great hands, and that was Zachary Goodman, who is a principal architect at CSDA Design Group. So, as business owners and architects, how often do we think about our IT provider? Typically, only when things go wrong. And for many of us, unfortunately, this happens too often, especially with the latest emphasis on remote work. I know that I've had to deal with my fair share of IT fire drills. Not pleasant. ArcIT, however, is a very different kind of company. They specialize in serving architecture, design, and engineering firms, and their goal is to help you use technology as a competitive advantage. This means that they understand your technology stack, and they won't waste your time and money learning how your tools work within your process. Combine that with industry-leading response times, proactive remote hardware management, and solid disaster recovery and backup solutions. That's something that everybody should be thinking of, honestly. And enterprise-grade security management. And yet, above all, these are just table stakes for a solid IT company. ArcIT goes a step further. They become your strategic partner when it comes to planning, budgeting, and integrating new technology into your business processes. So all of this sounds expensive, right? Nope, because ArcIT is highly specialized. For our industry, their pricing is on par or in some cases even lower than other IT providers. ArcIT is transparent and even publishes the pricing right on their website. Speaking of their website, there's also something else you should check out when you're there, and that is their Design Under Influence blog and video series. Again, adding value to IT-type solutions across industry, all good stuff. So your business deserves a competent, responsive, and proactive IT partner. Reach out to my friends at ArcIT for a free consultation. So go to getarchit, that's getarchit.com, arc like architecture in the middle, and click Work With Us. So thanks very much to ArcIT for sponsoring this episode of the Troxel Podcast. And now let's get back to our conversation. It's interesting to think about how many different directions this profession is being pulled by all of the different parties. And it is kind of a really, really odd tug of war. For control, for trust, for progress, for non-progress, keeping things the way they have been. There is a lot of various interests that are all at stake, and they're being pulled very hard in those different directions.
They are, and it's really interesting. I mean, I had some of the most fun of my career, during the years when I was on, integrated design build jobs while I was at Beck. And it was super fun when, I'm in the room and the design, the folks from architecture are in the room and the folks that are going to build it are in the room. And we're all kind of slamming ideas together.
Problem
and
solving, right?
And it was really great. And it was always ironic because, while I was working for a design build company, then the challenge was, I'll generalize again, but a lot of owners and clients don't want to trust that, which is interesting because, again, in that case, I had like that pie in the sky. Everybody's in the room and wants to solve problems together. Of course, then when you're not within that organization and then you're working with owners, you're like, oh, it'd be great to find a design build company, but not every design build company really operates as like one thing.
Right.
It's like, well, this is design and this is construction, and we're sort of together.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it is a pie in the sky vision, but, a bunch of us that worked quasi together back then, we all joked around that if the 5 of us could be the project team and we could just go do a job on our own, there was a designer, there was a modeling person, there was somebody who would run the construction team, we would have just killed it.
Right.
But
I think there's all kinds of small teams in lots of different offices.
Yeah, absolutely.
They all,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And the sad thing is they're probably all right. But so there's the 5 of you or the 5 of any of those groups. And then there's the person at the top who has to write the stupid contract, and then it's ruined.
Totally.
Oh, so true.
Well, thinking about design build in a very different way, I wanted to talk to you about designing and building Parallax team and how you've kind of grown your team over the last few years, especially I think in the last year, it seems like to me, in how you guys have gone from, it just started out as you. I know you added John, you've added several other teammates over that time. I just think it would be cool to think about or to talk about out loud building a team. And what I proposed to you was the difference between building a team and building the team, right? And I think that
Sure.
the pandemic is forcing a lot more people to think about building the team, about finding the right talent, because location is not married to work as much as it used to be.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I just want to kind of propose that maybe as a jumping off point for this section of the podcast. Get your take on maybe where you thought you were going to go versus where you ended up, and did those two things match up, or were they very different? I know things change
Yeah.
over time, right? But where did that start?
So it was kind of interesting, right? And so Parallax started in July of 2015. It was just me, and the original intent was for it to be just me, or one day to be me and Allison, as since we're both in the industry and we're both passionate about this kind of stuff. Um, and a lot of this also kind of goes back to how I got started in BIM from architecture. I mean, I love doing architecture. I miss doing architecture. Like I love putting models together, putting drawings together. When I worked in architecture, it was large retail shopping malls back when, as a country, we used to build shopping malls. Awkward.
Everywhere.
Um, and the trouble with that was, as I was learning Revit or learning modeling when I was in ArchiCAD or digital projects, I would get better at modeling, and it was making my drawings better, but it was also making the way I had to do them change. And the problem was, on a project the size of a shopping mall or a hospital or a university or a stadium, you can't work on a job by yourself. You have to work with other team members. So it was elevate the situation of the entire team or always work alone.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to work alone, I mean, yeah, you can do some big houses and that's cool. You can do some core and shell and that's cool. But I decided to step away from architecture and get into more BIM management because I recognized I was never going to be happy if the BIM stuff wasn't done right. But I couldn't do it right while I was part of a team, because you're not in the position to change things at the firm-wide level. And you also don't want to be involved in the drama of dragging everybody kicking and screaming, right? So similarly, when I started Parallax, doing BIM implementation for architecture firms, I love it. I love working with them to make their content better, to make their templates better. And for a while, that was what we were solely doing, and it was great. The first time I thought about bringing other people on board was when we got our first two jobs that contractors asked us to model. And it was that same exact situation as when I was working in architecture. I knew the model was going to be great. I knew it was going to deliver in what we wanted to do, but I was suddenly very, very alone. And I was like, holy moly, there's a lot to do.
Yeah.
And the immediate desire at the time was, there are a handful of people out there who care as much about the fidelity of the model as I believe I do. And I knew going in, those were the folks that I wanted to work with, given the chance. And that's tough because that isn't everybody in the industry. And for whatever reason, I know software is thankless. It's not sexy. I mean, Revit is, we joke around about PC and Mac, right? And Revit is not always seen as like the sexiest part of design, if you will. And so there aren't, a lot of folks out there who care about every nuance of the model being very well done. But when I first thought about scaling the company a little bit, that's who I really wanted on board. It was like, how do we make sure this model is great all the time?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that was the first thing. But the second part was, I've watched a lot of other companies a lot bigger than us. And so again, at the time, I'm still alone. And I watched a lot of companies talk about how they were going to grow into being profitable. And that scared the bejesus out of me. So I'm not a business person. I don't have a business degree. I have no idea what I'm doing most days. And, we're just a group of people who love doing the work, and we're figuring out the business stuff as we go. But I'm smart enough to know that when I hear companies talk about how they're almost profitable, but if they keep growing, they'll get to profitable, I'm like, alarms go off in my head when I hear that, because efficiency doesn't scale into more efficiency. It typically scales into less efficiency.
Right.
If you're operating at like 75% efficiency now and you try to double the size of the company, your efficiency is going to drop, because that 25% of inefficiency begets, wait, how do we do this? Or where do I find that book? Or, hey, does anyone know? And so I intentionally, and still to this day, we're growing very, very slow, because I always want it to be that we're already doing what we need to be doing, and dang, we're just way overworked and we need to bring somebody on to do more and to innovate more, but not that, oh, we'll suddenly be able to make it if we just have these other people here. So we've never grown as a strategy to be successful. But everybody that joined the team was somebody that, we didn't decide like on day one, like, hey, let's hire somebody. And then, okay, let's pick out these people. Everybody that's on the team now, when we had a conversation about it, whether it was, at an event or over email or whatever, it was like, oh man, imagine what we would do working together. And I mean, some of the stories are actually like, so, I mean, John, we were communicating over email and John was basically teaching me Dynamo because, here was this thing and I had no idea how to use it. And, John loves helping people in the community. And then he was teaching me how to do all this stuff in Dynamo. And I was like, damn, just like, but again, it was both of our nights and both of our weekends because like, he had a job and I was busy working. And it was like, man, imagine if we were just on the same team and we could just bounce ideas off of each other like this all the time. And then when it made sense, it just suddenly made sense. And similarly, so Lauren, Schmidt is one of the only people I know of doing landscape things that she's doing in Revit. And at the time, it was like I was just brutalizing. I was trying to like hammer these project site models into submission. And I wasn't even using Dynamo because, again, I consider myself a Dynamo noob compared to like, Lauren and John. So here I was just kind of hammering this stuff and reading Lauren's blog and, trying to like copy texture what she was doing into what I needed. And then it was like, geez, just imagine if we were all on the same team, and we talked at a couple of industry events. Again, just when it was time, it was like, this just makes sense because we were already thinking about how cool would that be. And then, the moment there's an interest, it's like, let's do it. And Melissa was actually like person one that was in the back of mine and Allison's mind, and Allison, my wife, who's also an architect of 20 years, like Allison used to challenge me when we were basically sitting at dinner, and I'd be just griping about needing help or something. And she was like, well, if you were going to let somebody mess with your stuff, like who would it be? Because I'm a control freak and everybody who knows me in this industry knows I'm a control freak. And it was like a topic of, I can't build everything myself. I can't do it all myself. It's arrogant and stupid to try. But at the same time, it was like, geez, would I ever be comfortable just sliding something I had invested years in building over the table and letting somebody else touch it? And I'm going to be honest, I really thought the first time I had to let somebody else monkey with stuff I had built at Parallax, I thought I was going to lose my bananas. I thought I was going to have to lock myself in a padded room. But then when Melissa expressed an interest in us teaming up and she came on the team, I mean, every single thing that she touched just got better. And it was like, holy cow, I don't even want to like, I mean, I've been the most known. I've been the most known for the door library because when I was at Beck, I started building door libraries. And I mean, we had to do a massive library update to the doors this year. And I mean, Melissa ripped through those things for like several hundreds of hours. And I thought I was going to be flipping out on the inside. And I was just kind of like, nope, don't even want to know. Like, just,
make it better.
And just everything's gotten better. And so I guess this has been like a long rambling thing. But to me, it's like, it's not about like, I always look at it as, it's not me saying, oh, let's grow. Who would we want it to be? It's like when I'm having a conversation with somebody about something work related, and I just say to myself, like, damn, I wish we were on the same team, like doing that together. Like that's when I know, like that's the person, that's the people that I want to be working with.
Yeah. It's interesting because, I know that you've invested a lot into infrastructure so that your team is all on the same page, which I think is a big part of being able to take on, like you guys have a documentation process, right? I think you're using Notion for that, which is one of my favorite tools as well, where it's like, when we decide something, it goes in here so that when somebody else needs it, they know where to look and find it. But you also have kind of this, IT infrastructure of mirroring all this stuff and standards. And you obviously create standards for a lot of different teams. So you've got to create a bunch of ways to update those standards over time. And I would assume that like that's a big part of, somebody's got to have a certain aptitude to join that, which is a given. Like they've got to be able to roll into that and understand what to do. Obviously, there's some training and stuff involved in that as well, because it's likely different than they've done it before. This is what happens when anybody joins a team at any firm, is they bring their previous experience.
Sure.
And have to merge that with your experience. But I would imagine like a lot of what you've done has paved the way for this to even be possible because of the way you have always operated, which is very organized and, like you said, very kind of controlling about some of those things.
Sort of. The one clarification I would make is I think even though obviously I was the first person, I don't think they're things that I have done. I think a lot of it are things the rest of the team has done. I'm very organized in my head.
Yeah. You got your note cards.
I'm very old school. Yeah, like even to this day, we are in Notion now and we were in Trello in between, but I am just, I'm very old school. I write notes. There's paper littered all over my desk. And I'm very hard on myself about the fact that as every new member has joined the team, I always wish I had been more organized or more prepared for them to join. There is a system for everything. Like everything does exist in a specific way for a specific reason. And over the last 20 years, if there's one thing I haven't been great about historically, it's getting all of those things documented so everybody knows the reason. And actually, on another call, we just talked about the bus factor, which I didn't realize had an actual name. Like the bus factor is a thing. It's on Wikipedia. It's crazy. If you get hit by a bus or hit by a truck, what's the damage? And could things be documented worse? Sure. But I definitely wish I had everything in my head. I wish I had explained a little better for all of the members of our team.
Right.
But what's also been great is as they've all come on board, they've all chimed in right away. And every single one of them has changed the way we document stuff internally. Yes, definitely on the IT side, that's something I try to take the lead on because I wanted a certain experience. And this goes back to why we also do like software deployments at clients' offices. Somebody asked us recently, like, why do you bother messing with software deployments? And I'm like, because if we sell you a bunch of nice stuff, but then it gets installed and it's all trashy and it's miserable, even though that's not a reflection on us, I don't want that experience at a client's. Like, I don't want the users to feel that. So the IT stuff is the same way. Like, yeah, we could have shoved everything up into SharePoint or, onto OneDrive and had it be, syncing to everybody automatically through the Microsoft interface or through Dropbox or whatever. But that's not the like echelon of performance that we wanted to feel. Now that does mean that sometimes our IT stuff is a mess. Like we had a week-long power outage in Texas. We weren't planning on that. So when my house loses power, obviously the rest of the company is left in an interesting situation.
Yeah.
But we're rectifying that. But I mean, some quick examples. I was totally on paper. And then when John came on board, we said, well, geez, we got to get rid of all of Aaron's paper notes because that's not going to work. So we went to Trello. And as you said, Notion was a great example. And John actually found Notion, I think from Asan, from Revit, and from a few other folks in the community that were using it. So he brought in Notion, which was great. And I mean, Notion didn't just kill Trello for us. It killed Trello and like 50 other documents I had laying around.
Yeah.
But then, I mean, there are other examples too. And I love that when Lauren came on board, we have our standardized Office documents, just, Word documents, Excel documents, whatever. And, the first time Lauren went to type a proposal in one of our proposal templates, she immediately just reached out and she's like, why does the right justified tab not work in this document? And I'm like, what the heck is a right justified tab? I didn't even know that existed. And I think it's going to sound small and stupid, but I think like you've got to have an ecosystem where everybody feels comfortable just like saying, hey, why is this way? And
suggestion box.
Yeah, to go back to what you said previously, though, I think it's important that people not just show up and be like, here's what I did at this other firm, because it's like eye roll, but when there's a legitimate question about like, why is something that way? I think that's awesome. And every single time somebody brings something up like that, it gets better for everybody. So
it seems like the people that have joined your team are like a specific piece of the puzzle. Like there's definitely some overlap between all of you, but there's also some specialization for each individual. And I'm wondering, how deliberate were you about that? Is it like you wanted to add functionality to your team, so you guys kind of found each other and made that work? Or because the way that I said it at my previous firm was, we're like purposed. Like we're not like-minded, right? Because if we're all if we all thought the same, like what's the point? Like, yes, I would love to clone myself. So would everybody else. But because I'm so perfect, right? It's better to have like a vision and a purpose of what you're trying to accomplish, and then let everybody be the puzzle piece that they are to your puzzle, and really like really hug the borders of the next person so that like you really are cohesive in moving as a single unit?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, and so the circumstances were different as every person came on board. So John was the first to come on board. It was kind of interesting because when John and I first talked about teaming up, there was some overlap, and I think it's great overlap. What he can automate and what he can program, both in creating new applications from the ground up and also in what he was teaching from Dynamo, piggybacked off of my penchant for having things overly standardized in a company. So those two things just worked really well together. But also, we kind of existed in like different spaces. And I mean, John has an entire set of, an entire client base that is totally different from what I do. And in that respect, I couldn't do what he does. The bus factor is high with John. If John's hit by a bus, and his clients look at me, it's kind of like, ooh, that's going to be interesting.
I like to say win the lottery, Aaron.
Win the lottery, the lottery factor. That's a better one. So it was interesting though, because obviously, so there is overlap, and that I would say is like strategic overlap, right? John can do a lot of what I can do, obviously. So, if we get hammered on a project that needs like 10 million people modeling, obviously, I think all of us at Parallax can do it. Mm-hmm. I enjoy doing the fine detail modeling. And so I kind of look at, when we talk about like John with all of his app development and Lauren, focusing on foreground and our new landscape initiatives, if we had a project that suddenly required like 5 people to be modeling full tilt all day and all night, I wouldn't want to put that on the entire team, because I mean, John and Lauren are working on things that, like I said, I can't do. Whereas the skills that Melissa and I and Allison and I have all been modeling together, for years, and we all model well together and we function well together. Again, I am the weak link there. I'm recounting in my head. Sometimes Melissa and I were working on a project together recently, and I was modeling on the wrong work set. It was really funny. But anyways,
no one's ever done that.
It was only funny on that particular day because Melissa and I were modeling the exact same staircase at the exact same time, and we just didn't realize it because I was on a different work set. And then of course, when we both hit sync, like the staircase was there twice, and we're like, well, like we almost came up with the same thing. I guess that's good. So, I mean, there is some overlap, and some overlap was intentional, right? Like, so Allison and I, we love modeling together. I mean, in 2016, when Parallax was barely getting going and we were still in our first apartment, we did some local custom residential homes for a local builder, and we love being in models together. And Melissa and I, of course, have worked on a couple of massive modeling projects together. So there did need to be some overlap, because again, the original goal for me, when I said when I would complain at the dinner table, like I need help, it was that the moment you take on modeling work, like one person is automatically too small. There's only two amounts of work when you're into projects like that. You either don't have enough or you have way too much. There's no happy, I can just punch out 40 hours of modeling and call it a day. So we did need some overlap, but it's been interesting that with John coming on board and with Lauren coming on board, we've branched into completely different sectors that we weren't looking at previously in terms of application development and starting to work with landscape firms, which has been near and dear to all of us, because again, Melissa and Allison and I have had to model some sites and landscapes that were just coordination-wise a total hot mess. Mm-hmm. And yeah, we can fix them, but we can only ever fix them one project at a time. Whereas if we can actually engage with landscape groups and start getting the fidelity of those models to be better, then potentially those issues can go away in the future. That's pie in the sky. Like if everybody gets better about modeling them, then the issues can go away. But
well, I appreciate you going along with me. I wanted to give you the opportunity here to just tell the audience like what's new with Parallax. Where are you going in the near future? And of course, I'll have links to your website and your social media and stuff in the show notes, but I would also love for you to just say what they are so that people who are listening can get a...
Yeah, absolutely. So we're all so interestingly enough, this year, so 2020 and 2021 with COVID and all of us being kind of on lockdown, some initiatives slowed down a little bit in terms of modeling for contractors and whatnot, and going on site to clients' offices. But that gave us some time that we've been working on expanding a whole bunch of interesting things. So Lauren and John have been focusing on some new applications, predominantly Foreground, which is this application that'll be coming out soon for actually modeling site and landscape in Revit and having it not suck as much as it sucks currently, which everybody knows is a lot.
It's a good goal.
And I mean,
Yeah.
it's in beta. Well, it's, there are still some constraints, from within Revit, but I mean, a lot of folks are familiar with like Site Designer, and we want to make the experience different than that. And it's actually in beta right now. A bunch of our customers are using it currently. So we're going to be very excited when Foreground comes out. John has been working on a number of different applications that do some really interesting things. Some of them are up on our website right now on the products page. Others we're kind of holding back until we're ready to really show them off. And on the flip side, I mean, Melissa and I have also been working on a lot of new architectural libraries just because we've had the time on our hands. So things that we weren't offering before, in terms of what the libraries are that we have, we've just started expanding them because after like the 800th customer asks why we don't have our own detail component library, we're like, okay, we're building one. And again, like, I mean, the level of fidelity and care that's going into that detail component library, like everything is keynoted, everything works properly, line weights, line styles, all being taken care of. So, we're excited about the new libraries as well.
That's huge.
Yeah, I mean, and again, it kind of sounds like small things, but we get, I mean, again, we love the highly parametric doors and the highly parametric cabinets as well. But then a lot of firms ask us like, well, what do we use for drawing details? And it comes up enough times that we're like, okay, let's just solve this and get it out of the way. I mean, John's working on an app for automatically tagging finishes. Like, it's one thing to automatically model the finishes, and that's great. But this whole issue of like tagging paint in a plan, how Revit doesn't let you do it, and everyone uses this goofy symbol. And recently we just did like a little experiment, like, could we do it? And so we found a way, and hopefully we'll have that out soon. So yeah, we're kind of going off in a bunch of different directions, but all exciting stuff. So
that's awesome. Overall, adding like a ton of value to the people that you're working with.
We hope so. We, a lot of our customers are always really excited. I mean, Allison actually works embedded with one of our customers, like almost full time, just actually knocking out project work. And I'm secretly jealous because every time I walk by her desk, she's got like an actual building on the screen, and I see all of our stuff in the building. And hopefully Rob at Michael Graves doesn't mind mentioning this, but so, Michael Graves Design, up in New Jersey, Michael Graves Architecture and Design, is one of our clients. And so that's who Allison works with most of her time now. And so they were actually doing like 2 beautiful 14-story buildings recently. And every time I look over there, I just get to see it. And I'm like, kind of makes me sad when I walk to the bathroom. I'm like, I'm modeling toilets and faucets, and she's working on a building, but that's cool. That's the game, right?
Yeah, definitely. I totally get that. I remember when going a lot more heavily into the technology side, a good friend of mine was just like, so when are you coming back to the dark side? He would call design the dark side, which, because, he's a Star Wars fan and obviously loved Darth Vader, but and at the same time, like, you're building something that is for all, right? You're building something that is much bigger than the contribution you can make on a single project for a single time, right? And that is a trade-off. And of course, we always want what we don't have necessarily. but it's a real battle, I think, that happens inside a lot of us.
Yeah. And that's the part that, I mean, over the last 15 years, I've just had to get okay with, right? I mean, and the beginning of 2021 was actually just a breath of fresh air for me, because we did have a new customer that was in a jam because they had a very large building, a very tall building, which is tall buildings in cities is just kind of it's just what gets me excited. And
what's on your shirt. Yeah.
Exactly. Most people, I've been told this looks like all kinds of things, but I'm like, yeah, it is a tall building. That's exactly right. In January or December of 2020, a new customer came up and just said, hey, could you just help us? Like, we're in early design. Could you model this building for us? Like, here's the design, it's in a SketchUp file for a number of reasons. And it's like 60 stories. And I spent weeks just hammering on this building, and it was so much fun.
Yeah, you're like, heck yeah, I can.
I'm like, heck yeah, I can. And it's obviously a project that we haven't posted any images of because we can't obviously at the moment. But I'm hoping one day we get to show it off, just because the entire exercise was such a fun story. And that particular client has just these great designers. And when we would ask them questions about what the intent was because of some abnormality we saw in a dimension, like this whole fruitful discussion would come out of it. And then I'd go back into my cave and get modeling again. And it was just a lot of fun. It involved a lot of conceptual massing editor and a lot of adaptive components. And it's just, I'm hoping one day we can show that one off. But
yeah, can't wait to hear those stories. Well, where can people find you, follow you guys and your journey online, and where would you like to send them to?
Absolutely. I mean, so our website is parallaxteam.com. It's one R, two L's, sometimes gets misspelled. We're also on Twitter at PRLXTEAM. And all of us have different Twitter handles. Of course, I'm Twice Roads Fool. John is 60-second Revit. Lauren is Landark BIM. Melissa is M Thiesens. Allison is the lone standout who is not on Twitter. So I collect all of her tweets. And there's a contact form on the website if anybody ever wants to reach out to us.
I'll put all of that in the show notes so that people can just click the links and not have to worry about remembering all those. But it is great to hear them, and it is great. You guys are all great follows. I really appreciate the contributions you make to the Twitter community. It seems like where the AEC tech people really do hang out more than anywhere else online. So thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation today. I thought it was fantastic.
Thanks for having me. And I apologize to any listeners if I was just kind of rambling off. I do that a bit.
Not a problem. Thanks, Aaron.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Troxel Podcast, and once again, I would like to thank Arc IT for sponsoring this episode. Visit their website at getarchit, that's GETARCHIT.com. This show is part of the Gable Media Podcast Network. You can see all the shows at gablemedia.com. That's GABLMEDIA.com. You can help support what I'm doing here by leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts to help get the word out, and of course, share it with your friends. I'd love to hear from you, so leave a comment on the website at trxl.co/podcast, where you can find every episode. You can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram and YouTube. Just search for eTroxel. Talk to you soon.